Hello and welcome to Mindshifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Thursday, September 2nd, 2021. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free on whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the Start Here link in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 17 years to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and turn any negative emotional experience into part of the infallible guidance system that we've each been given. Also on that page, you can download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click it, download it, print it off, and use it as often as you'd like. You can also go to your app store and type in the 3 words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness. And before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll get access to a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet, an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. We hope people do that soon and often because that gives them food for thought. And it might stir and answer a question, testimonial, and then you can give us a call at 563-999-3581 and press 1, and we can have a conversation. Or you can email Jeannie at jeanie@whyagain.org, whyagain.org. Or you can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. We're also doing the Course in Miracles workbook lessons this year. Today is the 245th day of the year. The lesson for today simply reads, Your peace is with me, Creator. I am safe. Commentary says, Your peace surrounds me, Creator. Where I go, your peace goes there with me. It sheds light on everyone I meet. I bring it to the desolate and lonely and afraid. I give your peace to those who suffer pain or grieve for loss or think they are bereft of hope and happiness. Send them to me, Creator. Let me bring your peace with me, for I will save your offspring, as is your will, that I may come to recognize my true self. And so we go in peace. To all the world we give the message that we have received, and thus we come to hear the voice for the Creator who speaks to us as we relate this word, whose love we recognize because we share that word that was given to us. And Pam Grout writes in her Course in Miracle Experiment book, Lesson 245, she titles it, Don't confuse a temporary truth or a temporary problem with an eternal truth. She quotes Robert Downey Jr. saying, Worrying is like praying for something that you don't want to happen. Pam writes, A month ago, I banged my shin into a coffee table. It hurt, it bled, it made an embarrassingly huge scab. I couldn't wear skirts, shorts, or dresses without people asking, What happened? So instead, I wore pants. It was easier than explaining how I accidentally injured myself in my own living room. I'm happy to report that today there's absolutely no sight of this unsightly wound. My shin, with no effort on my part, healed itself all on its own. my body was able to completely restore the temporary boo-boo without my participation. The three key words in that sentence are, quote, without my participation, close quotes. All problems are temporary. They will heal themselves on their own. Unless I decide to participate, to throw myself into action, here's how that works. I recite the problem to my loved ones, usually embellishing it to sound even more ferocious than it actually is. I start worrying using my powerful consciousness to add energy to something that I don't even want. I Google, I check out books at the library, I even join a support group for dealing with this problem. Most people applaud my efforts and hold up a big sign saying, you scored 10 out of 10 for my hard work and my commitment to eliminate my problem. But what those judges of my actions don't realize is that my active participation clogs up the healing force of the universe. It literally builds a wall. It adds material heft to the thing I'm working to dislodge. So today I remember my shin, how it fixed itself, and I will repeat lesson 245. Peace is with me, and I am safe. So that's our Course in Miracles lesson, workbook lesson for today, and the Course in Miracles experiment commentary from Pam Grout's book. And we've got about 50 minutes left to talk, answer your comments, questions, testimonials, entertain conversation. It is a Thursday, and so later today from 6:30 to 9 p.m. Central Time, there will be a Mind Shifters support group, and you are welcome to join or pass the information along to anybody you think might be interested in joining. All the information about how to join that group through Zoom is on the website at mindshiftersacademy.org. And we're grateful to everyone who joins us to participate in that and or forwards that information to someone that they think might be interested. And I am also letting people know about the Integrative Mental Health Summit, which is happening October 8th through 10th. It's an online, so it's a virtual summit. So anybody that wants to participate can participate. Even if they don't have any money to participate, you can have them reach out to me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. And their website is integrativementalhealthsummit.org, all one word. And if you go there, you'll read things like, we've gathered the foremost innovators, experts, and thought leaders in mental health with one purpose in mind, to better equip you, to give you the tools and techniques you need to treat, cope, heal, and support yourself or anyone struggling with mental health challenges. And by anyone, we mean every one of us. And they continue to add interesting people. I just found out today that Brad Yates, who has a very good YouTube channel where he does a lot of EFT tapping, and I've been referring my patients and others in the support groups to Brad Yates and his EFT channel for a couple of years now. And I've had people tell me, oh my gosh, he looks and sounds exactly like you when you used to teach the class in person, because I used to teach an all-day class of that 2 or 3 times a year in Barrington, Illinois. And so he stays very close to the original EFT. He is very solid in his insights and intuitions, and hopefully he will be on the panel with us at the Integrative Mental Health Summit, October 8th through 10th. And you can find out more about that. And with luck, he'll agree to let me interview him for the On Your Mind podcast that's hosted by Journey's Dream. Journey's Dream is one of the sponsors of this Integrative Mental Health Summit. And that brings up this week, on Tuesday, 2 days ago, they released or they published the interview I did with Paul Hendry. Paul Hendry with Jacobs Company. It's an international construction company with over, I think it's 55,000 employees. And Paul is a global vice president who began to become aware that mental health issues might be impacting the people that report to him directly. And so he started a mental health initiative at the Jacobs Company. And then an extension of that, it was so successful, an extension of that is their mental health champions. And that's like a 4-hour training that they give to people in their company for listening skills and identifying problem areas and pointing people towards resources. And then they launched the 1 Million Lives program. And the 1 Million Lives program has an online mental health check-in. You can go there yourself. You don't have to give any personally identifying information. They'll ask you about your gender and your age and stuff like that so they can track who's using it. But you don't have to give them an email or a phone number or a credit card, anything. It's just a very clean, clear oml.world, WORLD. And if you go to that website, it gives you the option to do a check-in. And if you say, do the long version of the check-in, I think it's 75 questions. It takes maybe 10 minutes to do. And when you finish it, it'll give you a report based on how you answered these questions about where you might work to improve your own mental health and stress levels and diet and exercise and social media presence, etc. And it's absolutely free with no strings attached. And Jacobs Company is making it available not just to their employees, not just employees, friends, and families, not just to the clients that they serve and their friends and families, but worldwide. It's now wide open on the internet, and it's a very useful tool. It's far less time-consuming than taking, the MMPI or the 16PF or these other personality assessments. Or it's a very concise mental health check-in that you could make a part of your life and probably help you stay closer to that healthy balance you want in your life by helping you assess these various areas just by answering these questions. And, I know people who do it once or twice a week just so they stay in alignment with their purpose. They're using it as the focus for their mental emotional hygiene tools like the EFT tapping or the Reality Management Worksheet or the breath work, the focused breath work, or the Byron Katie question, worksheet, or the Choose Again 6-step forgiveness process that Diedrich Wolsack has and we've presented on this show. So the resources are there. They're growing by leaps and bounds. There's also the website samehereglobal.org, samehereglobal.org. And that's another place you can go where you'll see practitioners that practice integrative medicine, functional medicine, holistic approach for mental health issues, people who tell their own story. The Same Here model is every one of us is impacted by mental health in one way or another. And so there are stories to read, there are resources, there's one of the benefits is to just, for a lot of people, to wake up and realize, oh my gosh, I thought I was the only one who struggled with this problem or that problem or this pattern of symptoms or that pattern of symptoms. And we're not alone. It doesn't really matter well, not alone. You're not the only one who's got a problem. If you have a problem, if you see difficulty functioning in one way or another, it's just a human pattern. There are other people who have it right now, have had it in the past, and it's quite possible that you don't need to reinvent the wheel to try and find, useful solutions or supports for dealing with that pattern in your life. So, support group tonight, the Integrative Mental Health Summit coming up October 10th, 8th through 10th. Plenty of time for comments, questions, answers, soliloquies, or stepping somebody through a worksheet. Call-in number is 563-999-3581. If you call that number and press 1, we can have a conversation. Another thing that's happened recently is that Dr. Bradley Nelson has agreed to be interviewed for the On Your Mind podcast, and he's the author of the Emotion Code book. And the Emotion Code book is a wonderful book. It's a wonderful tool. It helps describe and teach you how to do a very useful tool for, in Bradley Nelson's words, releasing stuck emotions. And I've been using a similar tool for a lot of years called the neuroemotional technique. And the difference is the neuroemotional technique talks about short circuits in the energy system, and it requires you to have somebody else to do it on you or with you. And the emotion code talks about stuck emotional energy in the body and teaches you how to do it for yourself, so you don't need an outside therapist. And the foreword is by Tony Robbins. He and his wife met with Dr. Nelson and Dr. Nelson's wife, and they really enjoyed it, and they're fans of the work. So it's a delight that somebody gave me an introduction to Dr. Bradley Nelson, and he's agreed to be interviewed. So that's another thing we might be able to make available to the Mind Shifters radio community. But it will definitely be available on the On Your Mind podcast at journeysdream.org/podcast. So, who do you think we should be interviewing? What's an author that you really like, and or a book that you've enjoyed that we should be reading or interviewing the author of? Or who's a podcast that you listen to on a regular basis that's changed your life for the better? 563-999-3581 and press 1. Or if you're listening to this show in the archives, send me an email with those suggestions at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. So, we've got the emotion codes we could talk about. We've got the Reality Management Worksheet we can talk about. We've got the Mind Shifter targeted journaling tool we can talk about. What's on your mind? What would be of use to you? When you call and you let us know what topic you'd like us to discuss or what question you might have, it makes it far easier for us to live into our intention to be of service. And that's why we're doing this radio show. That's why I donate my time and intelligence and money and energy to this project, so that we can be of service. And it makes it far easier for us to be of service when you give us a call and let us know what would be of interest to you. I had somebody in my office last night for a first time, and this person who is a 911 dispatcher. So all day long, this person is taking calls of people who are in crisis and trauma. And there really aren't any words to to describe how hard someone like me has to work in a session like that, in a first session. Because here's a person who absolutely knows how bad the world is, absolutely knows that we're on the precipice of disaster, because that's what her life experience tells her day in and day out. And when I suggest that there are millions of times more good things going on in the world in every given moment than there are bad things, it sounds like a fairy tale. It sounds like absolute gobbledygook to her. And yet, the fact of the matter is, to my observation and my life experience, if all that was going on in the world was what she hears in her 911 calls, we would have imploded. We would have gone to extinction as human beings hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. And yes, those things that she hears about in her 911 calls, they're real. People do struggle. There are tremendous problems. There is a tremendous wave of people pitting people against each other and people arguing the extremes of practically any position that you can think of. One of the examples she gave was that when this whole coronavirus thing started, they had people calling 911 saying, I look out my window and I see somebody who's out there walking and they don't have a mask on, or they're walking next to somebody else and they're not 6 feet away. And she gives that as an example of how human beings are turning against each other and how close we are to civil war or whatever. And while those incidents do occur, it is by far a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of 1% of what's going on in the interactions between one human and another. And if you haven't had the pleasure of reading the book, I believe the book is Tribe. We've talked about it before here. It's well worth the effort. One of the things that they talk about in that book is that back in the Second World War, they thought when the air raids happen, if the power goes out, if the government isn't able to keep things in control, people are just going to, kill each other by the scores. It's just going to be Armageddon. It's going to be the end of times. If the government isn't there to make sure that people treat each other in a certain way and enforce the rules. And what they discovered was pretty much exactly the opposite. That when the parts of a town got bombed and destroyed and the social services were offline and the police couldn't get there, what happened was human beings helped each other. I didn't mean to shock anybody. I should have given a spoiler alert warning there. Yeah, people helped each other in crisis. And they found that the nature of human beings, which is many, multifaceted, one aspect of it is survival, but there's a part of us that also knows that survival happens best with cooperation and collaboration. And that's facilitated by the fact that there's also this impulse to connect and to feel compassion. And, we have motor mirror neurons in our brains that let us be aware of other human beings having emotions. And, it's the physiological roots of our compassion are contained in the neural structure of the brain. And all of the doom and gloom that was predicted never came to be. Instead, people shocked each other by how nice they were, how much they helped, how much they cooperated, how much they collaborated. So my job, and working so diligently last night in the first session with this patient, was to try and help her understand that she has a very tiny window into a very thin slice, a myopic view, a microscopic view of one little tiny area of humanity. And if I focus on that tiny view, as we all do when we look out through our eyes and try to process the world through our five senses, we get a very skewed, very inaccurate picture of life. And life, the flow of creation in its abundance, in its potential for joy, creativity, compassion, appreciation, and gratitude, goes beyond words each new heartbeat. And so I can't really talk about it, except I can point towards observations. Observations like what people make when they write a book like Tribe, and they look back in history and say, we feared this would happen and we feared that would happen. But instead what we found is people helping people all over the place. So the next challenge with this person was to try to help her understand that she was creating her emotions, and that her quote burnout, close quote, and her pattern of seemingly incessant negative emotional states was not being caused by the outside events in her life. And of course, that's another thing that she's got to start observing for herself. She can't take my word for it. That's why we keep recommending here in this work that people do their own worksheets, that people attend the support groups, that people download the audio files that have, the tutorials, the living examples of people calling into this internet show and doing being stepped through a worksheet, that you start doing it for yourself, so you demonstrate to yourself that what your culture has taught you about your emotional states is not accurate. That every emotional state I've ever experienced was created inside me by this mechanism of me choosing an interpretation for these neutral life events, and then pouring my mind energy into the thoughts that make up that interpretation. Because it's my thoughts that create my emotions, and my emotions, which are just shadows of my thoughts, as Dr. Ryce says. So when I can identify that the mechanism of thought, whether it's a choice or a decision, whether it's an automatic pattern that's just kicked in and is playing out, or whether it's something I inherited from the bloodline, or whether it's something I was trained into by my parents because they always looked at everything so negatively. But the thought patterns that I apply to life events, and then the mind energy I pour into those thought patterns, are the only thing that cause my experience of emotion. Some people would modify that and say, like Dr. Bradley Nelson would say, that I can get emotions from an earlier time in my life stuck in my body's energy system. And I tell you, you've got some real powerful observations to work with if you combine Dr. Bradley Nelson's material with Dr. John Sarno's material and his hypothesis that tension myoneural syndrome is a way that our mental emotional tension cuts off blood flow to tissue in the body. And if it does so even by a 10% level for a short period of time, it's enough to initiate excruciating pain. And if you combine that with Dr. Bradley Nelson's ideas that we have emotions that get trapped in our body as energies that get stuck, and they can be relieved, now you can start to work with not just emotions, but also aches and pains and other symptoms or patterns of unproductive behavior. And with the assumption that when a system isn't working right, it means something is stuck or offline or unable to connect the way it should, and anything you can do to restore that healthy flow or that intended flow is going to start producing positive results. So whether you talk about it the way the neuroemotional technique does, about, reconfiguring the circuit breakers in the energy system that carry the acupuncture and acupressure energy in our emotions, or you talk about it the way Dr. Bradley Nelson does, and you say, hey, there's a stuck emotion and I'm going to free it up. And once it's freed up, it flows through me and it doesn't create the problems it was creating just minutes before. And you combine that with Dr. Sarno's work, it's the perceptual guess, my best guess. It's the picture my mind's showing me when
someone's life. A young boy is taught through being yelled at and punished the conflicting thoughts that, and I use the example of a very popular idea in our culture, sex is dirty, save it for the one you love. Consider the file folder effect and what results when one is expected. What are you going to see firing from those links in the mind? And Richard pops out the idea, well, it sounds like fertile ground for insanity. And I offer back, you got it. Until he can forgive conflicting realities in his mind, anything that resonates sexuality will trigger sex is dirty, save it for the one you love. The resultant flow of realities will probably leave him in conflict because hooked into those files, whenever they're resonated, are desire, guilt, conflict, and punishment. Do you see why negativity?
When the muscles start to tense up, and if it constricts blood flow to tissue even as little as 10%, it's enough to initiate excruciating pain. So, chances are, whenever that's happening, Dr. John Sarno, an actual orthopedic surgeon, a back surgeon, he quit doing surgeries and just focused people on their mental, emotional health. And his success rate went from in the mid-30s up to the high 80s. When you consider success to be elimination of pain, complete restoration of motion, and no need for further surgery. So whether you look at Dr. Bradley Nelson's book, or you look at the EFT tapping with Brad Yates, or you look at Michael Ryce's Reality Management Worksheet and still point breathing and targeted journaling, there are an abundance of tools to help us have a better life, a better mental and emotional hygiene. And it takes a little effort. It takes, Michael would say, persistent and consistent application of these tools. And we're here to help support just that. Our call-in number again is 563-999-3581. Give us a call. Press 1. And let us know if anything about the topics of conversation so far today are resonating anything with you, or if there's a different topic you'd like us to explore. 563-999-3581. We've got about 22 minutes left. Let us know how we can support you. Press 1. Let us know where you're calling from and what's going on in your young life. I have somebody that I was dealing with earlier today and helping them cope with some stresses in their life, and they were talking about how they have had so many traumas in their life that they feel like they cannot function well. And again, we're doing more of the same. We're talking about the breath work. We're talking about being aware of the body. We're talking about understanding how the patterns that get locked in me from the generations and from my life experiences can get stuck in me. And so we recommend the breath work and the EFT tapping. And to begin with, when I introduce people to this work, I introduce them to the mental short version of Michael Ryce's worksheet. His current worksheet's 7-step. And the mental short version that I introduce people to get them introduced to the work, says, anytime I notice that I don't like how I'm feeling, I stop and I take a breath, I turn the focus inside myself, and I ask myself, what emotion is this? What emotion word could I put on this sensation that I don't enjoy? And then I take another breath and I realize that I only experience emotions after I've poured enough of my mind energy into a particular thought pattern. So the second step is I ask myself, what's the thought I'm using to create this emotion? And I take a breath and I discern the thought. I figure out what thought it is that if I pour even more energy into it, the emotion gets stronger. And then I take a breath and I realize that every time there's a thought that I'm using to create a negative emotion, that thought will contain a goal that's not getting met. So right there in the thought are the roots of the goal that I'm holding that is not getting accomplished. And I breathe and I identify the goal, and then I take another breath, and the fourth step is I cancel the thought and the goal, and I ask to be shown the hidden part of my own mind that's actually creating that upset. And once I step through that, whether I just do it that quickly or I add the forgiveness pattern, which talks about canceling my need to be right and canceling my need for anyone or anything to change, including myself, etc., then I eventually take another breath and scan my body, and I notice how I'm feeling. And I can repeat that cycle until at the end of that, I feel calm. And the fifth step is then I think the most loving, safe, gratifying, contented memory that I have from any time in my life, and strengthen that memory until I feel that energy rolling in my heart space. And when I do that, I start to notice that I spend a tiny fraction of the time in my life in the negative emotions compared to what I did before I learned these tools. And that's our offering. We're here to support you in learning about how your mind and body work together, how your automatic decision system is keeping you stuck in patterns that you don't like the results of, and assisting you in whatever way possible to switch that up. Do something differently so that there's a potential for different and eventually better results in your life. So give us a call and let us know how we can support you in doing that. We've got 18 minutes left. 563-999-3581. Call that number and press 1. And let's have a conversation. Let us know what we've talked about so far today that seems on target or off target for you. Let us know another topic altogether that you'd like to have us discuss or explore. I'm reading a book by a gentleman who is a psychologist, and he's writing about being on both sides of the locked door of a psychiatric hospital. Because when he was younger, he got labeled bipolar or schizophrenic, and he was locked up and given medications, and there was private practice to struggle for years not knowing how I was going to pay the bills and feed the kids. I didn't like any of that.
Will be the resulting reality flow in a spouse's mind, considering the file folder effect. Richard says, I suspect it would be pretty crazy, like I've been in my marriages, he replied grimly. Precisely. Confusion will be the result. Suppose we get two people in a marriage, each with similar realities, and they continuously resonate these kinds of brain cells for each other. You mean like in my marriage? Marriages, pardon me? Bedlam. It's insane.
His name is Ronald Bassman, Bassman. And when he was only 22, he was shackled and put in restraints and given what back then was supposedly a therapeutic approach. They put him in the shock therapy at the time was insulin comas. And basically it's life-threatening. Not only did they numb his body with his mind with drugs, then they put him into these insulin comas time and time again, trying to shock him out of the creative, expressive, peak emotional experiences he was having. And this book is a story of his courage, determination, and resilience as he worked through being a psychiatric patient, locked and drugged and shocked without his consent, to becoming a psychologist and finding ways to work with people that experience things like that while honoring their humanity and their individuality. So if you know somebody who's struggling or has a family member or a friend who's struggling with mental health issues, and they're going to a traditional psychiatrist, conventional psychiatrist or psychologist, and all they're saying is, hey, you have this incurable disease that we'll call schizophrenia, or we'll call bipolar disorder, or we'll call borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder, and or a list of others. And the only thing is to take your meds and stay on your meds. If you know somebody like that, in the first place, if they're happy doing that, if they're on 2 or 3 meds and it's working and they're high functioning and they like life, don't intervene. They're having a good life. The meds are working for them. That's great. But if you know somebody who's taken 2 or 3 or more meds and they're still struggling with depression and anxiety, and or they're constantly complaining about how sluggish and foggy the meds make them feel, please direct them toward other resources. Other resources include samehereglobal.org, the Integrative Mental Health Summit.org, the On Your Mind podcast at journeysdream.org/podcast, because it's not, we're slowly coming out of the dark ages in psychology and psychiatry, and people are developing and promoting and coaching and providing useful tools to help people change these patterns within themselves in a way that respects their individuality, honors them as a person, a whole person, and doesn't have a lot of negative physical side effects, which are just main effects that people label as side effects. They're just the effects. When you take a drug, it's got an effect. If it's the one the drug company wants you to have and is promoting in their ads, they say that's the effect. If it's anything else, they call it a side effect. But it's still an effect. And as Michael Ryce likes to point out, every drug is a poison disguised as a cure. And it really doesn't make any sense to think if you have a healthy person and you give them this substance, it's going to make them sick. But if you have a sick person and you give them this substance, it's going to make them healthy. And yet, we have an entire system of psychological and psychiatric treatments, not cures, that are based on that illogical premise. It just doesn't make sense. You take a healthy person, you give them a substance, it's going to make them sick. It's going to make them feel foggy, cloudy, give them headaches, dizziness, nausea, make it so they have difficulty functioning. But if you take a sick person and you've defined that person as sick because they're having symptoms that either they don't like or they don't want to have, you give them the same substance that makes a healthy person sick, somehow that's going to make the sick person healthy. I don't think that makes any sense, and I wish I didn't have to report that that's essentially what our psychological and psychiatric models and treatments are based on in the conventional realm. So we are looking forward to helping change that narrative, giving people a much broader, deeper exposure to a wide variety of tools, whether it's somatic therapy, EFT, reality management worksheets, breath work, Dr. Brad Nelson's emotion code, the neuroemotional technique, EMDR for trauma and other types of therapies, meditation. There's a whole host of devices that are coming out that help people by giving them more immediate feedback about their system, biofeedback. There's a brain meditation device called the Muse 2, M-U-S-E with the number 2. And it's got Bluetooth connection to your phone, loads up an app, provides this nice music and these beautiful pictures, and it reads your brain waves off of your forehead and from behind your ears. And so it gives you feedback when you're relaxed, when you hit different brainwave states. There's a device called the Brain Tap, and it provides light stimulation to your ears and your eyes. At the same time, it pumps binaural sound and music and meditative voices into your ears, which is another way to try and help lift, boost, improve brain function. There's a device called the Mendi, M-E-N-D-I. And again, this is another device that reads your brain waves off of your forehead. And it has an app that basically provides immediate feedback on your phone, and you're trying to get the little ball on your phone to move in one direction or another. And as you develop the relaxed brainwave state, you get the immediate feedback of the app changing and the ball either rising or falling. If you get relaxed, it goes higher. If you get tense, it goes lower. And you can help train your brain to different levels of deep relaxation with the assistance of these tools. If you have difficulty meditating on your own, there's all kinds of good devices for that these days. Just the tip of the iceberg. Actually, it's just a snowflake on the top of an iceberg of different ways to help people with their mental emotional problems than just loading them up with drugs. And of course, the one we promote most often here is the Reality Management Worksheet. the 3 early memories of conflict, the mind shifter targeted journaling, the codependence to interdependence worksheet, all these available absolutely free at whyagain.org. And if you have any questions about how to use any of them, absolutely free, 5 days a week, 2 hours a day, support for how to use those, clarification on what they might be used for. Not only that, 10 plus years of archives. The first 8 years, 1 hour a day, 5 days a week. And now for the last 2 plus years, 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. Area code 760. You're in the air. Who do we have?
Hey, this is Ann down here in Florida.
Hello, Ann.
I just appreciate your show always. Anyway, I haven't listened in a while, but yesterday and today. So this morning when you started out, you were talking about the ACIM, and then was it Pam Grout's commentary maybe after, something about an injury, or maybe you said something about that, and having an injury and not telling.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I did on our trip up to Michigan and back, the peninsula, with my family and 3 dogs, pulling a 37-foot trailer. And I like what you said, or what she said, is that if I go and tell the story of how I bumped my head, because I just discovered this morning that after a week and a half, I have a tender spot still up there. It had the goose egg at the time, and I didn't get ice on it right away, but I did once, later on. And I realized that if I continue to tell that story, except for right now, then it takes me back to the whole thing of how it happened, and then I had some emotional things that I said to my daughter, and then it just does that snowball effect of, wait, I don't need to go there with all of that. It's been dealt with, and I learned some lessons, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, so my question is, so then it's like Dr. Ryce says, we don't necessarily need to tell the story. It's what is the emotion that's coming up, and where did we go with it? So I don't need to tell the story about a lot of stuff that happened on the trip. It's just I need to go inside and say, hey, what did I learn from it? And part of it was to keep my mouth shut and do my own work. Would you agree, disagree that, just because an injury? And so while I was listening to that, I put some aloe on the tender spot on my scalp, and it's like, okay, I'll let the body heal it. I don't need to, go over it with anybody else that I come in contact with. But would you say that works for the rest of our issues that we go through, or problems that we think we have, that the more we tell it, the more we revisit it when we don't necessarily need to?
Well, yeah, so that's a theme through a lot of the work with great teachers is don't keep telling your story. Yeah. Right? Find a way to release it. Find a way to find out what's stuck about it. Find out what you're gaining by holding on to it so that it has to be retold over and over again. The point that she's making is that today's lesson from Course in Miracles reads, your peace is with me, Creator, and I am safe. And in Pam Grout, she paraphrases that at the end of her lesson and says, peace is with me, I am safe. Well, she just used the example of how she banged her shin on a coffee table and then, right, complained about it to everybody, but then she forgot about it and she wore pants to cover it up, and it healed itself all by itself and left no big scar, and there's no sign of it whatsoever. And she woke up and realized, oh my goodness, that took care of itself without me having to think about it. So most of my life takes care of itself without me telling the negative stories about it. And when I tell the negative stories about it, I start worrying, Pam Grout says, I'm using my powerful consciousness to add energy to something that I don't even want. Next thing you know, I Google it, I check out a book about it at the library. I probably move me through it far more efficiently if I wasn't telling the negative story over and over and over again.
Okay,
now, some people take that to an extreme, and then they say, oh, I shouldn't be doing worksheets because that's got me focusing on it, or I shouldn't do EFT tapping because that's got me focusing on it. And my response to that is, I think that's an avoidance. I think that's a denial. I think that if I have a pain or a fear or sadness or a physical ache or pain, it behooves me to understand that it's going to move through me. It's an energy. It's a temporary thing, and this too shall pass. And use the tools to dismantle any negative thoughts or emotional energies that I might have, or as Bradley Nelson says in his book, might be stuck in my energy system. They're invisible, and I don't become aware of them until they get resonated, but they're still there. I can use the tools to dismantle them. And when I do, I open the energy flow and things heal better. And there's a big difference between doing my work around something and staying stuck in the negativity and telling the story and dramatizing it and traumatizing it.
Yes. Okay, so it's like, so that's the other things that happened on the trip that I learned, that I gained from, just because now I might see, say, my family in a different light from their interactions, husband and wife with each other. I still need to do my work that caused my emotions during listening to that or watching that happen. Yeah, okay, because it came around again this morning.
Well,
so
and there was something that you said that's kind of a red flag, where you said, you know, what I learned for one of the lessons in this is I learned to keep my mouth shut. Well, that has a fairly negative connotation, and it's about, you know, shutting things down, and it's about not communicating, and so you might want to do some work around that, because that's at least the way it landed on my ears. It seemed like a fairly negative conclusion.
Yeah, I would agree. Good catch, of course. That's why we call in, at least I call in, because I can get this feedback, and it's like, oh, yeah, okay, I get it. Thank you.
All right.
I appreciate it.
All right. Blessings. Thanks for the call. I will remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. And I hope I can welcome Jeannie Ryce.
Thank you, Dr. Tim. And I got two of the equipments that you were talking about that read the brain waves. I got the, let me find it here, the Muse 2 and the Mindy. What was the third one?
Brain Tap.
Brain Tap. Okay. Thank you.
And that's the one that has lights and sound and binaural sound, and the lights go in the ears and the eyes. All right.
Okay,
Blessings.
awesome.
Have a wonderful show.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tim.